This is a photo competition app that I've started using over the last middle summer, probably. I think it's really, really important. Some of you are in photography. That is an elective option for non-tiered classes for you guys, and I highly recommend it. How many of you are in that right now? Is anybody, yeah, Callie, you're in it? Have you got, it's an online kind of hybrid. Have you kicked off already? Yeah. Yeah? So, Guru Shots is a fun little platform I've been using, uploading my photos, entering competitions, challenges, all sorts of random things that help you get your work out and connect with others. I'm going to have, over the next couple, probably starting off next week, my cinematography students will be expected to jump into Guru Shots. I haven't decided exactly where we're going to utilize this because everyone's different. So you might enter a nature thing, you might enter a portrait thing, industrial. So it just kind of depends on what the challenge is. But I highly recommend looking into some of these. There's others. There's 500px, there's ViewBug, and in this case, I really like Guru Shots. 500px is cool because you can license your stuff and actually sell it through some of they're owned by Getty Images. So basically, it's Getty's chance to kind of grab up other individuals' photos and get them to license it. And you can license it right through the site, which is really nice. So I recommend that you guys look into some of these things as you start to snap stuff and build your portfolio. A lot of my photos that do really well on here are cell phone shot, actually. So it doesn't necessarily have to be right out of your T6i. I took this while we were on a boat outside of Columbia. So I didn't even want to have my nice camera on me because this was our one off day on that project. So you never know. The best camera is the one you have with you in that moment. So you should look into this. I actually don't know the platform that well from the desktop version, the computer. I use it almost entirely from my phone, and that's uploading and entering and competing with others. And I have a team that I jumped on a while ago that we enter challenges together and try to get votes together. So if you're interested in something like this, we can look into it more later. Not what we're doing today, not what I want to get into, but Judah mentioned some photography and he's snapping more. Please shoot a lot of photos. That is one of the best exercises for a media production student, a journalism student, a design student. Understanding your camera and composition and telling that story visually is a practice that you should really indulge and become obsessed with doing regularly. So this is something that our advanced class is going to be diving into this year. I've done other competitions with that class before. This one I really like because there's plenty of photo competitions that exist. You enter, you wait, find out if you did well or not. But it's not so much building a profile the way some of these others like 500px and ViewBug and Guru Shots. And I can do a whole lesson on this later this semester if you're interested in that. I do like to include a photography assignment from time to time in here. COVID really motivated that. When that happened 3 years ago, we had to come up with single individual assignment, more of them. So I do think this is one of those great things if you're up and coming and even a seasoned professional to get your work out there to the public. And this is worldwide. So yeah, didn't want to dive too far into that. I am going to kick you guys into our first assignment today. So within that, I want to go over a couple of things that'll help you feel a little more comfortable diving into the next week. Essentially, let me show you these settings and formatting, and then we'll wrap with this and come back, and then I'll let you guys get some shots. And I want to go around and look at some things individually with you. So first off, how many of you have tinkered with your camera since you've had it for literally, oh, can you get Jaden set up with, Nathan brought one back yesterday. I think it was number 24. He said it was working fine when he brought it back, but you might run a little test through just to make sure. And Jaden, did you have your own camera, or were you going to check one out? I was going to check. Okay, I just thought I'd double check. So, how many? Anybody experiment? Have any good experiences, bad, confused or excited, or any questions? Anything that you thought? Anything that doesn't make sense that you want to cover right now, or do you just want to look at it after we break as a group? If you have a question, it might pertain to everybody. So, well, let's start with SD cards. This is kind of like your gasoline in your vehicle in a lot of ways, because if your card's too slow, if your card is not compatible, if you're trying to put diesel in an unleaded engine, it's not going to run. So in this particular case, we wanted to provide you with a card to get you started. I do not want you guys spending money on things like this right now. As you get more acclimated and start doing more projects, and you start working for like the fair and the Hutch Rec and the college and the athletics or whatever, you'll want to start acquiring your own cards. I put these on our consumables list, so that means that kind of like tape or batteries, I essentially anticipate these going bad. They don't last forever. Whereas if I buy a lens, that would not go on the consumables list, even though you're likely to not have it forever. These cards will eventually crash on you, and they do get a little beat up. However, they're incredibly durable and extremely affordable. When I first started, the lower class was running $1.50 a gig, maybe even $2 a gig, and we're talking like slower cards that didn't hold much, maybe 1 gigabyte. This particular one holds 32 gigs, and it's a class 10, which is the minimum that I want, and I'll show you exactly what that is, how you read that. That's the speed that we need to hit. These cards are so affordable now. I think I bought a 256 micro card for like 30 bucks the other day on Amazon. So as the technology advances, it's benefiting us as consumers quite a bit. We have options, and they're quite affordable. Let me see if you can even, yeah, you're not going to be able to see it well on here probably. I move it back. Here, Zoe, can you come? I know you're trying, you can worry about that. So as I look at this card, it's going to be really hard to see, but you can see it's 32 gigabytes. That's pretty plain in there. But right up here at the top, or sorry, the middle, I see a tiny little C with a 10. It's going to look like this. It's going to have a 10 with a C over it. That's kind of the minimum that I want to aim for, okay? One of the cards we had in our stack was a class 4. Probably would run photography through it. It'd probably shoot photos, not at the full speed that it could, but it's not going to shoot your highest quality video. So a class 10 is where I really want to stick. And for whatever reason, they went from like 4, 6, 8, 10, and now when you get into 4K and you get into higher frame rates, you have to get into what's like called a U1, a U3, and then it just goes up from there. But a 10 is what I'd like to keep you guys around that minimum, is a class 10 card. That'll be plenty of speed for our 1080p MP4s that you guys will be producing through the majority of the semester for sure in here. So let me get back up here. I'm going to show you how to format this. There's plenty of videos online. I like to show you myself just to get the, it's not crazy. Some of those videos get real salesy, you know. The card only goes in one direction. Now there are micro SDs, that's what I'm using in my Lav right now, with an adapter that you could run off this as well. So that is an option. And you'll see the camera does shut down entirely if the SD card door is open and not closed all the way. So when I click it, it'll pop back on. Same thing with the battery door. If those aren't closed, it has a sensor to tell it that is no longer open, or that is no longer closed and it needs to shut down. Partly that's a safety mechanism to keep stuff out, especially moisture and things like that, dust. So formatting, super simple. Whether you're on video mode, as we are now, or if you go to photo mode, it's all the same. We're still going in the menu. You will be in the first wrench. See if I can do it with my finger so you can see. Format card, it kind of defaults to that one because you're not likely to be selecting these other things. File numbering, you can set up how your images are titled and things of that nature. It's good to play with this, get to know it, figure out some of those things, but for the most part, all I'm worried about to get you into this assignment is formatting the card. What's the one thing you always have to think about when formatting? What's the first thing that goes through your mind when you think of formatting a card? Some of you experienced people like Andrew. Yeah?
Like deleting all the files.
It deletes all the files, thank you. When you format your card, everything is gone. It will not save those files anywhere. There is recovery software. It is not cheap and it is not guaranteed, and you're lucky to get 80%. So if you have 10 images, you format it, you run recovery software, that is not a simple process. You're lucky if you get 7 or 8 out of it. You're not going to likely get everything back. So formatting the card, thank you, Dayton. The very first thing that you need to consider, media management. We'll dive into this heavier on Tuesday once you have some stuff on here. But if you have something on there that you know you want to keep right now that you went and shot, you need to dump that before you go through this formatting process. Anybody ever formatted something that they didn't dump before? Has that ever happened to anyone? No? It absolutely can if you don't develop the right habits now to make sure that you're duplicating your stuff and not just in one location. It needs to be in multiple locations, and that way you know your project is safe. So it's as simple as clicking through. This card has 29.8 gigabytes is what it can hold. What did it say on the outside of the card? You remember? It's a 32 gigabyte card, but because that it stores information on it already, you don't actually get that full 32. And you're going to see this in hard drives. You're going to see it. It needs operating software in order to be utilized. So you really don't get 32 gigs. You really don't get 64 gigs. But that's standard on any of them. So you're not getting gypped by that particular brand or that model of card. It's the way it is. I just have apparently 4 gigs of something on here. This is from an old student card, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. This is very, very fast. Some of these other models, more professional models, when I format on the red, it can take a little longer. But typically, it is a very fast process and shouldn't hold you up. Just click OK. Just like that. And I like to go back in and double check just to see. I always do it. It's a weird thing. 160 kilobytes used. Kilobyte is 1,000 megabytes. Megabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. So essentially, the card is as empty as it can be. And then I can click over to video mode. And now I'm back to where I'm able to shoot. And if you look up here, it's telling me that I can shoot 29 minutes and 59 seconds on this card. Now, it's a 32 gigabyte card. You get roughly 8 gigabytes runs for roughly an hour. So if I'm on 32 gigs, I should have about 4 hours of footage, somewhere in that ballpark. However, it tells me I'm doing 29, 59, just under 30 minutes. Why do you think that might be? Yeah?
That's how long the battery will last.
No, that's a good question, or that's a good thought. But my batteries, and it's not a great image, my battery's right here, and that's giving me that indication on how much time the battery has running. The reason that it can only do under 30 minutes is because this is a photography-centric camera. What that means internationally, when you ship these, photography devices are cheaper on taxes and all of that crazy political, financial stuff that's above me than a video camera. So they get around that, and it's not only Canon, various companies do this, where they make the limit 30 minutes. It'll shut off at 30 minutes. So if you're running an entire sporting event, you're running an entire Dylan lecture or wedding for more than a 30-minute ceremony, you'll have to stop somewhere in there and then start again in order to capture that entire event. Something that's very important to consider when you're trying to pick the right camera for the right project. So Dylan lecture tends to run an hour. You don't want to run a T6i or a DSLR that's photography-centric that'll only run 30 minutes. The camera is physically capable of it. The card is physically capable of it. If I take this same card and put it into the C100, it'll run the entire time. It'll run the entire time the battery will allow it. It'll run the entire time that the media is still available. So your camera is limited at a 30-minute runtime straight through. It's just nice to know because it can catch you off guard. If when you do an interview assignment, most interviews you really don't want to go over 30 minutes for that assignment anyways. It starts to get a little redundant after a while, but you need to strategically place it so that you're going to probably take a break at a half hour or only ask them up to 30 minutes worth of questioning. So this summer, Jaden and Zoe and I shot some interviews, and they all ran at least a half hour. They ran like 40 minutes and like 50 minutes, and then like a couple hours with your family, I think it was. It was a pretty long one at your aunt's house. In that case, we took professional models. We didn't utilize DSLRs. We had to use cinema cameras that would cost more to ship internationally through trade and things of that nature. So it actually has nothing to do with the camera as capabilities. It was designed that way when they engineered it. So depending on your card, you could have as low as 8 gigabytes and still get an hour. I want you to have probably a 32 or a 64. The reason, now the cards go all the way up to 1 terabyte. You don't need 1,000 hours of footage on one card. That's for very specific scenarios or for higher frame rates and codecs. In this case, 32 or 64 is great because I don't want you having 3 and 4 projects saved on your card. That's horrible media management, and it will absolutely backfire on you eventually. So where you're saving time on the front end, you're absolutely going to lose stuff eventually. So if your card, does anybody have under a 32? I think everyone should have at least a 32 gig. Okay. Well, I'm going to go into the assignment. I'm going to explain, actually right before we do that, let's cover our assignment is essentially exposure. It's that aperture. It's what's in focus, it's what's not in focus, but mostly manipulating exposure. So I'm going to cover again real fast the exposure triangle. I uploaded the video from our last lecture. It is in the assignment, so if you want to see the other basics on the T6i, and like Jaden, you weren't here, you guys can go back and look at that YouTube link, and that's in the assignment. I'll find a better place to stick those things once we have more. But so that way, if you are curious about what we talked about last Tuesday, it's on there. It's in there for you to see. So remember, first things first, I do not want you adjusting with your index finger on the wheel. That is shutter speed. That is more of a photography component when you're trying to adjust exposure and motion blur. I like that to be roughly double. So if I'm shooting 24, I want it at 50. I can touch for the aperture and the f-stop. I can touch it if I need to, if I like to. That's one way. And you'll find, whether it's editing, whether it's running a camera, whether it's running a light, there's so many different ways to get what you are trying to get to. There's always more than one way to skin the cat. So the other thing I can do is if I do want to use my, got off, back at 50. If I do want to do the exposure from that wheel, I can unlock it by clicking this button here that you can't see very well, the AV button. If I hold that down, that I have with my left index, can you just open it? There, thank you. That AV button, if I hold that down and then spin the wheel, I can adjust aperture that way without having to click into the touch screen. I really like this part when I'm using it because I can do it with my thumb. That'd be the right way to do it. You got your thumb on AV, and now that wheel works for you. But since this is a video camera second and a photography camera first, that wheel defaults to the shutter speed. And then last but not least, we have our ISO. I have it at 800. I really like it at 800, or less or more. Which one? Less, thank you. I prefer it to go lower. This thing will go up to like 12,000 and more. It is not going to be a good image. It's going to be so grainy. It's going to be falling apart. Unless you're looking for a low quality, static-y look or something kind of artsy, there's really no reason I like to utilize that. So this assignment is going to be mainly an aperture-oriented assignment because you'll do shots outside, you'll do shots inside, and you'll adjust that aperture accordingly to find the right exposure. Okay? Those are the 3 things that you're looking at. It's okay to move the ISO around, but don't get up into like 1600, 2000. You really need to start messing with that aperture first. And then shutter speed, I just want you to leave that locked in at roughly double. So if you're shooting 30, be around 60. If you're shooting 24, be around the 150, even though 148 would be ideal for this. Real quick review here while I have you. Push the Q, and then in the middle, see right here, I have full HD, 2398. You can do full HD 2997. Oop, lost it. And that's on a timer that I don't believe I can turn off. But one of these FHDs, once you get into HD, what is that? Do you remember from Tuesday? Is what? No. Oh, darn it. We're looking at the size. So FHD is 1080p, and then just HD is what? Did you say 720? Yeah, 720p, which is still technically high definition, but it's a lot smaller size. I can pull up a diagram that shows roughly what that difference. So I'd like to see you guys in one of these first 3. Full HD, 29, full HD, 2997, that's a lower quality. It's better if you're shooting like a live event, you're going to get a lot. And then full HD, 2398 or 976, depending on what system you're in. And then you adjust your shutter speed accordingly. Outside of that, I don't want you stressing too much about these other things. You have stuff where you can adjust color. You can mess with different auto modes. You can do different timers. You can mess with different focal points. We'll get into those things. You'll use those things. But right now, we're just going to bite off a real simple component of the exposure triangle, and that's the f-stop. So let's look at what that assignment is real quick. Oh, thanks. Okay. So for the first assignment, most important thing you need to know typically in this scenario is it'll be due in 1 week. So down here, I got that information updated. If anything looks inaccurate, please let me know. I've absolutely not saved correctly or had a typo here and there. I'm very human in that capacity, so don't hesitate to let me know that something doesn't look right, or if it just doesn't make sense. Maybe I didn't word it in a way that really speaks to you. So I want a total of 20 shots. That's not too terribly much, but I want them spread between 10 being inside, 10 being outside. Typically, I get a question of the sort like, can I shoot through a window outside but technically be inside? And I think that's okay. We've had scenarios where it was raining really bad during this assignment, or in this case, 105 each day. But I want you to expose for outdoors and expose for inside. So that's where I'm aiming for that. So what a lot of students, it's okay if you go outside the building and shoot around here and come inside and shoot around here. This isn't necessarily go find the best location, cast a bunch of actors, and write this beautiful script and then edit it amazingly. We're centrally getting our focus around the exposure triangle right now. I would love for you to have a story component to it, if that is possible, but that is not what I'm looking at. That would be something that if you are already going to football, like you guys have to every day, maybe you put together some sort of a bit of a hype video and kind of tell that story off of a practice. And you could do some in the locker room, in the weight room, and you could do some out during a scrimmage. I've seen that quite a few times, that kind of scenario. That's great, because as a professional videographer for a football team, whether it's NFL, college, or even something else, you are absolutely going to shoot in a locker room and in a weight room and in meetings, and you're going to go out to a field, and you might be in a stadium the next time. So you're going to have all these different components, and you need to be able to adjust exposure on the fly in order to have usable imagery. So there isn't any story that could not be an option for this. So Dayton, if you had an assignment in journalism, I don't care if you have it and you're doing it with your scholarship job and you're turning it in for student and field. That's great. It's all the better. I'm sure Brad would appreciate having something put together as much as I'd like to see, what you're out doing in your journalism class too. So we had a student last year. She worked for a local company here, and they would let her stay clocked in, come to class, and then go back, and all of her assignments were marketing pieces for that company, training videos, how-to videos, promotional videos. So she was able to turn that in for work to her boss and to me for a grade. And I thought that was just an awesome way to really utilize her time. Yeah, Jaden?
So in the other classroom doing interviews, could I just record that and use it?
You could add, because you probably don't have to have a video component for that one. So if you're in another class and you're utilizing script writing, say you wrote a script in script writing, well, I can actually go film it. I think that's great too. Just kind of like when someone's going to their job and filming there, that's the same kind of thing. Yeah, if it just adds to that assignment and makes that assignment stronger, that'd be awesome, yeah. We had a student 2 years ago who was going into podcasting. That was their focus in the program. And so I wanted them to be in the podcast room as much as possible, but they needed a video component. So he would go in and he would film his podcast and then utilize these things in each assignment to try and use the podcast as his like palette to test it. So yeah, it's totally cool. So let me just read through this with you one time. Otherwise, there's a chance half of you won't read it. So you shoot 20 shots with various aperture settings, 10 inside, 10 outside, half being low aperture. What do you think the low aperture is for the inside or the outside? Just putting you guys on the spot. Inside, you're going to have a wider aperture letting in more light when you're indoors, right? You're going to have a larger aperture outside when you are when you're trying to let less light in. And we'll talk about how that is affected here as we get more into it. You're not required to tell a story, but it's worth additional credit towards it if you do extra whatever. This assignment is not designed to be a tough graded assignment, so you do not need a story to get an A. It just makes it a little more enjoyable for me. And I have actually had a student do an assignment that was this basic in concept that got into a film festival. So there's always that opportunity. If you are able to piece something together that makes sense for like an actual story, please do. But if you're just going, man, I'm trying to figure out what this button does and what this button does and why this is off, don't stress yourself. Like I said, you don't need to go get an actor. You don't need to go find a script. Ultimately, you could go out in the parking lot and then out in the back and then go to the lab, and all of them have different lighting sources to adjust your camera accordingly. So that is perfectly fine. Let's see. Tuesday, so shoot anything over the weekend, just get your 20 shots. Tuesday we'll import into an editing system, Premiere Pro or DaVinci, and we'll show you some media management. So we'll meet in the lab on Tuesday, and I'll go over just some of the basic editing things for those of you who maybe only taken Post 1 or haven't taken Post 1 yet, or maybe took Post 1 like 2 years ago. So I will help you get kind of comfortable in that too. We're not trying to rush through any of this here at the beginning. We'll upload to YouTube. We used to utilize Vimeo a lot. Vimeo is great. I still really like Vimeo for certain things, but their price just went up like a crazy amount. I dropped all of my Vimeo files because I had 75 clips, films, behind the scenes, various things on there. I was paying like $70 a year, and they were going to delete 20 some of them and make me pay up into the hundreds to keep all 70, so I was only allowed to have 50. So I basically have moved away from Vimeo after almost 10 years of uploading to them. YouTube, unlimited file uploads, the amounts, all that stuff. When I first got into this program, we really pushed Vimeo because that's where a lot of creatives were, and kind of said stay away from the cat videos and things and the vlogs that YouTube is so heavily influenced by. We've kind of transitioned that. So if you like to use Vimeo, I took it out this year, but you can. I just need a workable link. Do understand you have limitations on Vimeo. whether it's uploads per week or amount of data per week, all the way to they're going to just start charging you to make it usable, essentially. So I like YouTube. It works fine for me. I do say please don't send me MP4 and MOV files. If you're having trouble and something's not working, we can work around that, figure that out. I might ask for you to give us an MP4 and MOV file to use as an example. So don't just delete it after you get it on YouTube. But that's not what I want you to turn in for this assignment and for screening next week. So it's worth 50 points, which is pretty typical. My assignments are usually around 50 or 100. We'll screen on Thursday. So a week from today, we'll come in. We're going to watch your stuff no matter how rough, no matter how insanely outside of where you thought it was going to end up, because that is such an important component of us as creatives to show our work and discuss our work with each other. So I expect everybody in here to participate with this stuff, showing your stuff, and also giving suggestive critiques, asking questions, saying they like this. This is a great way for you to start seeing each other's style and what you like to do, because when you start working in groups, you're going to want to pair yourself up appropriately if you choose to work in a group later. So uploading to YouTube is required for me to see it for grading, but before I can grade it, I want you to present it in class. You do not need to have graphics. You do not need to have music, any titles, any sounds, no effects. You don't have to color correct it all crazy, but you're more than welcome to add and experiment. Some of you have been through Post 2 already. You might be going, I was already wanting to mess with this new motion graphic thing in DaVinci, and it'll take me no time at all to assemble this and export it, so I think I'm going to take this opportunity to add something to it. Or if, like you guys do, say you do a football promo, and you might say week 1 practice, blah, 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 I don't know. Please don't hold yourself back from those things if you'd like to add it. But I will not be grading on that. I will not be focusing on it. I won't be critiquing that. I'm more than happy to welcome it all because these are mixed media projects. But if you want to add those things in, I would definitely take that into consideration when grading that. You put in some extra time. You put a little more passion into it or a little more production value. Never hurts. If you do want to add music, we'll do this on Tuesday, not today. We have an APM music account that we pay a lot for at the college. Please take advantage of it and utilize it. It's got some really high quality stuff on it. And I don't want to, like I said, don't want to get into this today too heavily, but you can't just grab stuff off the internet and put it on. So if you hear something on the radio, it does not mean it's free game for you to put into your project. That'll get you flagged on YouTube. It'll get your stuff pulled. It's adding a lot of work for something that YouTube's algorithm for sure will catch that stuff real fast. Their bots are really accurate. Yeah.
I mean, actually, sometimes they'll just demonetize you, so essentially, and it's not bad. What they do is they just take away the money that you could earn from the video by views, and they turn it in over to the people who actually like own the rights to the video. So they do the legal stuff for you, but if you like take it way too far, and that's very rare, they will actually take you down. I've done some questionably illegal stuff on YouTube, so.
Yeah, we had a scenario, and again, I don't want to eat up too much time with this because we ramble about it all day. And we do have a media law class that covers a lot of this subject matter as well. We had a scenario where we had music in the background of a video that was playing, and it was an 80s song. We got pulled just in Japan. So we couldn't air in Japan, but we could still stream across the rest of the world. The company that owned that song was located in like that Japan market. It was weird. This back in 2020. I have to find the warning. We had no idea. We didn't notice it. My brother got married in Mexico. A lot of family couldn't come, so we live streamed it. I think Facebook. I think we sent out through Facebook. Well, we were at the Hard Rock Casino, Cafe, Resort in Mexico. Well, of course, they had music playing around us. So all the grandparents and stuff that couldn't make the trip, the stream got yanked down because you could hear AC/DC like playing a couple hundred yards away during the wedding ceremony just on a speaker. That got us yanked down. See you later. So that absolutely can happen. It doesn't always mean I won't be able to see it, but yeah, like you said, they might pull that earnings and give it to someone else. Then there's way more other stuff to kick into, but we'll get into that. For instance, you don't want to market as for children, things of that nature, just keeping yourself protected. So I want to give you some visual examples. My favorite that I mentioned we'll utilize a lot this semester is Studio Binder. Trying to remember if this is the one I like. It's really long.
The extreme.
Studio Binder has some of the best examples for us to see. This is a bit long for how long I wanted to go. We probably won't watch all of it, but I do want to show, I want to give you some visual examples before I send you running around to try and do this yourself. So we'll watch a little bit of this. Not leaning towards the whole thing.
Depth of field. Good filmmakers understand that depth of field is a spectrum that can be fine-tuned to best serve the narrative. When we say depth of field, we're referring to an area of the shot that's in focus. Whether it's deep focus, shallow focus, soft focus, a rack focus, a split diopter shot, or a shot with a tilt-shift lens.
So they're covering some pretty advanced scenarios here. We're not going to dive into all of those, but we can't discuss exposure through utilizing and manipulating exposure through the f-stop setting without talking about depth of field. So we're definitely not going to dive into the later things. As you can see for this particular course that they put on, this is episode 4. We're going to cover those things, but I like to cover them in my own, is that in your way? Sorry, man. Well, I like to cover them in my own order.
In this video, we'll be examining 6 different types of camera focus. As we progress, we'll be filling out a shot list using Studio Binder that you can download and reference. Now, it's time to focus. We'll start with deep focus. When both the subject and background are shown in crisp detail.
Okay, because I haven't seen this in so long, I just really want the diagrams. I'll probably say things that they'll repeat. So when you're seeing everything in that navy blue, say all of that's in focus, that is a higher f-stop rating. That is going to be upwards of 9, 10, and plus. Remember, we go all the way from, with this camera system, we're hitting anywhere from, I think it's 3.5 to 32. So huge range. A lot of lenses don't have that kind of range. Some of our cinema lenses, will max out at like a 16, like a 1.8 to a 16. That's not uncommon. But once we get past this rating towards the middle, most everything is going to be in focus. And you're closing down that aperture so less light is coming in. So those are the two things. As you let in more light, your depth of field is going to get more shallow. As you take more light out, more things are going to be in focus.
This is known as deep focus.
So this is super easy outdoors. It's way, way, way easier when you have sunlight, our most powerful light source, to keep your f-stop really high. So what we're looking at here is we can tell who these individuals are. They're not in great focus. They're not super sharp right up here in the foreground. But if we knew who these characters were previously, we would be able to identify them. So they're still in enough focus that we can see who they are. All the way back to, you can see the rows. The fence is definitely in focus. Trees are a little softer, but it's all kind of there. It's not necessarily blurry.
When you have a group shot with subjects of varied...
This is another good example of it being deep, but indoors. So in this case, you don't have the sunlight. Fluorescent lights, which these probably aren't actually fluorescents on that set, but a bunch of light needs to be added into this scene if you're going to get a deep focus, a lot of depth of field inside. We would need to crank the lights up in order to do that because the aperture would be closing down. So this individual all the way over to here, back here, all the way up here, all of them are in focus. You can identify who each individual is.
In distances from the lens, or if there are important details to be gleaned from the background. Shots with deep focus can offer more visual information to the viewer. This allows the viewer's eyes to explore at their own pace and allows dynamic action to play out on multiple planes.
Am I a go to assist Dr. Stone in removing the panel?
Assistance appreciated.
Permission granted.
The stunning opening sequence of Gravity utilizes extreme deep focus. The depth of field stretches all the way from our astronauts to Earth's atmosphere. This is a single 17-minute take. Gorgeous though this shot is, there's another reason why deep focus works so well here.
Go ahead, Houston.
As chaos erupts, our deep depth of field allows the actions to stay in full view. With everything in focus, it is our own eyes that do the editing.
So in a sense, utilizing a large depth of field here enabled to kind of add to the chaos. If we had really lowered that aperture with a shallow depth of field, that would be telling the audience where to focus their eyes. We want you to look right here at this time because this is what's in focus. But when you have that much chaos taking place at once and everything sharp and in focus, that's going to help really give an opportunity for your audience to kind of be just covered with that chaos. They really can't help them. They don't know what to look at. This thing's flying by, this arm's doing this. It just really is a really clever way for that director of photography to let the audience kind of embrace that insanity that's happening during that period of time. Let's see, I want to go into some shallow focus here. This is a nice image. I don't know the film off the top of my head. Usually it has it under here. But clearly, we're not looking at these two. When we have that soft focus, if we had had that out in space, we would have known, are we looking at George Clooney, or are we looking at the Earth, or are we looking at this piece of the shuttle? But in that case, everything was in focus. You were getting to feel all of that. In this situation, we were isolating an individual. We were only going to be able to focus on him right now, mentally, because it's the only way visually that we can focus. Something I like to point out that this is what cinematography is talking about a lot this semester, is look, we're outdoors, and look how soft that focus is. So you're going to need neutral density filters. You're going to need different types of blocking. You're going to need different types of light sources. You're going to need to eliminate light. There's probably a big 12 by 12 over the top of them, and then they replicate the sunlight just so they can control it better. But being outdoors, that's a really shallow depth of field for being outdoors. Really difficult to do if you don't have the right system or the right tools.
Use a shallow focus. Shallow focus renders a portion.
So you can see if we're shallow, this plant, this house, they're not necessarily going to be in focus, but our character is. That's going to be a lower aperture. They're going to be closer to the 3.5 range to pull that off. So you'll notice, especially in independent films, a lot of indoor shots are on the lower end because they're using what they have at their disposal. Not everyone has an $8,000 area 60 light to just pop into the scene all of a sudden, right? Or studio grid lighting like we do here. So a lot of our indoor scenes tend to be shallow depth of field. You can write around that, you can tell your story around that. If you want to get a larger depth of field and you need to get more people in focus inside, you're probably adding some lights or opening some windows, or I've opened garage doors, or just anything. I've used all sorts of lights for that case. Let's get some examples.
While leaving the rest of the image soft.
So that really is a beautiful way for you to visually start telling your audience what you want to tell them You're going to say, don't look at that cactus, don't look at that house, look at our actor here. But if that house was really intricate, or they just ran into that cactus, and they want to show that pain, then you want everything in focus.
This is called the plane of focus. The soft.
So there's a beautiful shot. You can't tell, I couldn't even tell you who those people are in the background. There's definitely multiple characters moving throughout the scene, but they're not identifiable. If they're ancillary characters and they don't matter, then do you really want them to be in focus, or do you just want them to help, fill that scene out so you understand what the location is full of?
Out of focus portions of the shot can be the background, the foreground.
This is funny, Zoe. This is like exactly what Aiden shot for their project yesterday. I don't think I have it on here. I don't think I saved it in any way. He just had it on his card, dang. So the cinematography group is doing a suspenseful Blair Witch themed like hiking trail horror film, and one of their shots is looking through leaves to see, it's supposed to be their monster POV, looking through leaves as their people walk down the hiking trail. I mean, I literally got to show this to them tomorrow. Actually, I'll just screenshot this real quick. Give me a moment. Okay.
Or both. There are many uses for shallow depth of field. For a romantic effect, imbue an element with meaning, or to isolate a subject. Shallow depth of field can also be used to create the bokeh effect, where out of focus points of light blur like this. Most shots use some degree of shallow focus, and it is useful for guiding the audience's attention or to suggest a character's emotional state.
So especially when you're conveying heavy emotion, if you have your actor going through some sort of like trauma that they're experiencing, low depth of field is a beautiful way to portray this. Look, you're not distracted by anything else. The colors are fascinating, especially if you're hitting a specific color palette, but we'll get into that way later. But in this case, that shallow depth of field is really gorgeous if you want to really isolate that. And the other thing, they mentioned they showed it looked like false teeth or something. If you're trying to isolate onto a specific thing, like I want to see the remote, what does your character want? They want this remote control, and you want to have that shot of that remote control. You don't want to have distractions like the eraser and the marker in there if the focus is just that remote control. So a shallow depth of field is great to help show that desire. Thinking about how you're going to carry your stories along visually, and how these we're going to give you different weapons in order to, and to conduct that. And shallow depth of field, large depth of field, are two of the ways that we start doing that right off the bat. We're not even in September yet, and you guys are going to start telling that story that way. Any questions about this? It's not, again, nothing in this class is rocket science, but we'll take little bits and pinches at a time before we bite off the whole thing, and it'll all start coming together for you to make more complete stories. So I think Studio Binder has a nice, let's see, some other diagrams that I like to show real quick.
We go. Your go-to solution for getting quality work done quickly.
I love some of their graphics they use. So here's the exposure triangle that I drew up the other day, way cleaner and nicer and more legible. But if we're looking at ISO, we're going up, shutter speed, 125 working down, and then aperture 2.8, but we're at a 3.5 on this particular lens, and we go to a 32 instead of a 22. You see a lot more of the 2.8 to 22 range really when you're utilizing it. But what I love about this simple little diagram is they give you kind of a visual. So this is what we're looking at with the aperture ring inside your lens. As we open it up and it's more shallow and we're getting less, a 2.8, or in your case, a 3.5. So if you're indoors, open that up so you can get more light in. If you're outdoors, you're likely going to have to raise that up. Now, when you get to that situation like that last low depth of field that we saw with that emotional actor, that is outdoors, but clearly not at an f22 because he was the only thing in focus. So that's where you start bringing in other filters and pieces to get some really unique shots. But we can't get to that point without starting with these basics here. So when you're outdoors, be thinking, I'm probably going to raise it up. I'd say you're going to be at an f8, probably higher, depending if you're in shadows or what time of day. This time of day, you're already getting into probably being at least like an f6 up. Now, if you're indoors and you're in this room is so dark right now that I can't imagine you could shoot anything but a 3.5 if you're going to stay at that 800 ISO and that double shutter speed. But I want you, if you're going to use this building, I encourage you to try the lobby. Big window, a little different. Tall, long window. The lab, really long, like chest up window with blinds. Mess with it. Try some different things. Come in here, you can click on the LED lights that are super bright. You could turn them off and then go with the studio lights. You're not going to be penalized because your shot is not great. I want you to, this is more of a participation project. Give me 10 shots inside, 10 shots outside. If it isn't working, we'll know that on Tuesday and we'll be able to critique that for the next assignment. But the rubric for this isn't going, oh, your shot's pretty grainy and it's a little shaky and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not too worried about that. I just want you to be messing with your aperture to go from this room to that room and how you have to adjust from a 3.5 to a 5.6 because now you got a big bay window in your face. Or the sun's kicking through that side of the building and not all the way over here. In the garage is pretty much completely absent a light, which is why the students really like doing sinister, dark. They always have like someone, a hostage, interrogation. I think I showed you guys, did I show you guys Set Free? No, I showed the other class. I need to show Set Free, where he's chained to a pole back there. So when you want that, what's great is no light means that the students are able to really manipulate that and add in a light and get for that emotion that they're going for. But this particular, I'll just add this graphic as well to the assignment. And I don't want to spend too much more time on YouTube today watching stuff, giving examples. I want to get you guys hands-on and I want to look at some things with you, answer some questions individually. And you three in that corner all have either not seen the T6i yet or have two different other models. So I definitely want to catch you guys. Any questions about this, where we're at? I'll add this video and today's lecture, assuming Zoe and I are able to get it processed quickly. I'll add those to the assignment too, so you can see some of these things. Yeah?
About this stuff and the assignment, when we're doing these 10 and 10, are we supposed to be like taking a picture and jotting notes of what this is and then adding that into the assignment so you guys
Nope, I'll see 10 clips inside and 10 clips outside in your film when you turn it in. Yeah.
randomly?
Yep.
And it won't matter?
Nope, you can have them, you could have it start inside, go outside, come back inside, go back outside. It's really up to you. I just want to see you adjusting exposure 10 times inside and 10 times outside. And it doesn't have to have that story. So if you want to just do 10 outside and 10 inside and just export that. The one thing I should have, I'm glad you asked that though, I did bring up something else. I want you to be shooting at least 5 to 10 seconds on your clip. That doesn't mean that you can't trim some off when we go into the lab and post on Tuesday, and I'll add that to the assignment. That is something I forgot to include. I do want it to be at least 5 seconds long. I don't want a quarter second of a clip. I want you to at least have 24 frames kick through 5 times. And then when you're in post, if you're going, this is blurry here, I don't mind you chopping it up then. But while you're in practice, you're not often going to have a clip that's usable under a few seconds. So how you organize that doesn't matter. You could have every other. You could have outside, inside, all the way through for 20. And then turn that in for a YouTube. Because it's simply an exercise. It's not meant to be a narrative story.